Hi everyone, I am Johnny. Today I am here to take new photos and show you in this video how it's possible to do a fusion of two images taken with two different filters. To make these photos, I will use a color camera and two filters that have completely different characteristics. I want specifically to show you how it's possible to manage the potential of broadband and narrowband filters and merge them together to be able to manage a single photo that has characteristics that combine both filters. But let's start from the beginning. How do we do in post-production the fusion of two shots taken with two different filters? And above all, what is the simplest and most precise way to be able to use the filters so as not to have problems when we shoot? Many of you asked me, how do you do the fusion of two shots with two different filters? But this time in particular, Optolong asked me how I managed to create a shot like this. After they saw this shot, they asked me, will you show us how you do the fusion using the L-Quef filter and the L-para filter? Thanks to their request, today I'm here to photograph two subjects to show you my results. I hope that this is a prompt and a stimulus for you to try something new in astrophotography. But first of all, let's explain what difference there is between these two filters. The L-Quef filter is a broadband filter and is one of the latest Optolong products and allows you to photograph with color astronomical cameras, giving us a big help for removing gradients. So it's a filter that helps us improve contrast and cleans the images from light pollution to have a cleaner shot and easier to process. And then we have the L-Para filter. Big news of this year for Optolong. It's a bi-band narrowband filter with a 10 nm passband for H-alpha and O3. I had the chance to test it also from Rome where I live with a Bortle 8.9 Sky. You can see on my channel the tests I did and the photos I published. Really a great filter that impressed me for the result obtained in the shots. The L-Para filter removes in a high manner light pollution, offers a remarkable contrast between sky background and nebulosity, thus releasing more detail on the nebula. And moreover, it has an almost total absence of halos due to very bright stars. So we have two filters of latest generation with completely different characteristics because they work on completely different visual spectra. One filter works on the entire visible spectrum, so from infrared to ultraviolet, capturing all the colors that we find in the middle. The L-Quef filter, a broadband filter, and the other is a very selective filter that cuts lights except for two channels, namely H-alpha and O3 for a 10 nanomeric bandpass. And it's the narrowband bi-band para filter. So two filters with two very different concepts and functionalities. What I want to show you is the potential you have by combining these two filters, using the performant characteristics of both, and merging everything into a final image with unique characteristics with the potential of both filters. But to prepare for the fusion of this image, we need to have good enough starting images. So let's see how we can use the filters for optimal capture. The position of the filter during shots can determine the change in performance. I'll tell you immediately the best position of the filter relative to the sensor. The filter must be located as close as possible to the sensor. This is the optical train. During shooting with the Newton, we have a Skywatcher coma corrector f4, and from the coma corrector there is a back focus of 55 millimeters to the sensor. So from the coma corrector we have the electronic field rotator, ZWO, with a thickness of 16.5 millimeter, an M54 M48 adapter 2 millimeter thick, the filter wheel containing precisely the filters L-Quef and L-Para that I'm using for these captures, which has a thickness of 20 millimeter. It's a ZWO 2600 duo camera that has a gap between the sensor and the protective filter of 17.5 millimeter, and all the space that exists between the sensor of the 2600 camera and the coma corrector allows me to reach the correct back focus for photographing. But if I move the filter to the end of the coma corrector where there is a thread to screw the filters, what happens is that the light passing through the optical train between the filter and the sensor undergoes distortions due to the coma corrector lenses. The light drop that we encounter between the various thicknesses we have inserted and everything can lead to unwanted reflections, especially on very particular stars. The Alnitak star comes to mind, which is one of the brightest and most annoying. And it's one of those where strange reflections are always just around the corner. Know that I try to test and see firsthand every issue. I don't take anything for granted. So if I tell you, it's because I've done multiple tests, putting the filter after the coma corrector after the rotator and in various positions to understand if image disturbances can be created and what the best position is. Okay, but even if there are strange reflections, we do a photoshopping, and in post-production we solve everything. It's not exactly like that. My way of handling photos in astrophotography is quite simple and linear. That is, a nice shot with as few retouches as possible will almost certainly give good results. So few disturbances from the filters help to achieve a clean shot. And to do a final integration with an eventual workflow for post-production management, that's really minimal and dispensable. But are there other distortions caused by filters? Well, yes. Putting the filter inside the back focus of the optical train can cause the variation of the ideal focus point for managing the shot. And how do we calculate it and find the correct focus point once we have inserted our filter? That is, there is a simple system to solve this problem. And what other problems do filters cause? Once I've put the filter in front of the rotator, so I've nullified the possibility of reflections, it should be enough. But no, we don't like easy things. Yes, you can solve it simply, but the explanation is a bit complex, so let's help ourselves with images. Then we said that our ideal back focus is 55 millimeters, and in between we can put all the possible accessories respecting this measure. When we insert the filters, what happens is that the focal point changes and shifts slightly, and can be explained by this formula: delta focus equal filter thickness divided 3. The refractive index is a fundamental property of any material. In practice, anything bends light. Water, air, glass. So when light encounters the filter glass, what happens is that the light finds a distortion point that leads the focus point to be further away compared to the original focal point. This change we call delta focus. To circumvent this change, we must move the back focus point exactly by a third relative to the thickness of the filter. So if I'm using a filter that has a glass thickness of 3 millimeters divided by 3, my focus point will have a shift of 1 millimeter. So I should add a thickness of 1 millimeter to adapt my filter to the new optical system created. Once we have inserted the filter in my optical train, especially when the optical system approaches an f4 or f5 to have precision, this distortion becomes more and more evident, and therefore it's necessary to reach the optimal distance. So if we add a thickness which is 1/3 of the thickness of the filter, we have solved it. And what is the thickness of the Optolong filter that we are using? Optolong tells us that the glass thickness of the filter is 1.85 millimeters. So if we add a thickness of 0.6 millimeters to the back focus, I have found the correct back focus point to have an ideally clean image and without distorted stars. It's enough to add them to the optical train to be able to reach the correct back focus and have a clean image while using the L-para and L-quef filters, and thus have a clean shot. If you want, you could also think about the camera tilt, but we'll talk about this thorny problem in another episode. Let's say that using these simple recommendations, we manage to achieve good shots. But do these filters help us in any way? From my astrophotography experience, these two filters are really an important help for 3 elements that made me choose to photograph with these filters. First of all, an almost total cleaning of the photographed field from gradients, so a contrast between nebulae and a sky background. Really important. So this naturally leads to more detail of the subject we are photographing. And finally, an almost total lack of halo, even around the brightest stars. These aspects determine a fundamental help during the shot because they allow a very simple processing, avoiding having to fix anomalies present in the photo in post-production. But let's come to the photos that Optolong asked me for to understand how the fusion between broadband and narrowband occurs. A beautiful set of shots, really demanding I prepared for this test. 4 series of shots, one series without filter with 5 shots of 300 seconds, one shot with the L-Quef filter, 5 shots of 300 seconds, one shot with the L-Para filter, 5 shots of 300 seconds, and finally a fusion between the shots of the L-Quef filter and the L-Para filter. I prepared this test to make you understand the difference that exists between the various combinations under a medium polluted sky. But beyond this, Optolong also asked me for a final shot, always of the same subject of several hours, to understand how far you can go with a fusion, with shots from 2 filters, how much the signal is amplified, and how much it improves in short. Let's see everything step by step. Especially, let's see how you do this fusion. Once I decided the target, I collected all the material and finding available. Nights was almost a titanic task. After Optolong contacted me, practically the sky was impracticable, and I was almost afraid not to be able to finish this project, which in any case was really an intense challenge. So I thought to photograph the M8 complex and its nearby nebulae, an NGC 7000, that is the North America Nebula. But how do you choose a target? To be able to manage the fusion between broadband and narrowband, can we photograph galaxies and nebulae with this process? So galaxies that have a signal across the whole visible spectrum, So using a broadband filter like the L-Quef filter in general, we have many galaxies to be able to photograph. M31, M33, M51, M106. But these galaxies, in order to affect a fusion, must also have narrowband signal, so H-alpha and O3, that we can manage calmly with the L-Para filter here. The issue becomes a bit complicated because the narrowband signal refines a bit the detail of galaxies, and to collect the narrowband signal we need several hours of exposure, so galaxies are subjects that lend themselves a lot to affect a fusion, while nebulae must have defined emission and reflection nebulosity components, like the Horsehead Nebula, the Orion Nebula, the Heart Nebula, the Swanwall Nebula, in short, here too. The targets are multiple, and we can have fun doing fusion. Every time we have a mix of gas components that allow recording a combined signal with much presence of ionized hydrogen. And our nebulae have a wide presence of ionized hydrogen. Let's say that ionized hydrogen is the most abundant element in the galaxy, emits a red glow with a wavelength of 656 nanometers. So my choice of target was based on the gas elements present in our galaxy that have much signal, both in broadband and in narrowband, and this allows me to mix the signal and merge it together into a single shot. At this point, I have told you how to shoot best, how to choose well the shot and the subject with the right characteristics. And after having made all the shots that I needed for the test and for a final photo, all that remains for me is to tell you how to manage the shots and how to proceed with post-production by processing together. I'll show you some steps for post-production in a simplified way, knowing that in this case we are doing the fusion of 2 shots with fairly different visual components. I do it with Pixinsight, but you can easily handle it with Deep Sky Stacker or Cirrel. I've gotten used to using this powerful tool, Pixinsight, and I want to take advantage of its qualities. So the first step is stacking the frames. What I do is put all the frames together in the weighted batch pre-processing for a single processing with all 3 types of frames we chose to photograph. So unfiltered, with L-Q filter, with L-Para filter. Once I've inserted the lights, I insert the flats for each filter and the related dark flats and the darks, which, since they have the same temperature and the same exposure time, are the same for all frames. So just one is enough. We move to the status bar at the top until the section indicates calibration. And here we select for each master light of each filter, we are using the color camera. So we select CFA and Bayer Matrix RGGB, which is the Bayer Matrix used for ZWO cameras. Same thing for the flats, which must be indicated as color frames. So we select CFA. We specify the folder where the finished process should be placed and tell it to proceed with the automatic reference file selection. So we click Run to start the process and wait for it to finish. Now I speed everything up so as not to lengthen the video time, please. Before proceeding with stacking the frames, check all the single frames individually. Pixinsight has a script called Blink that allows you to quickly verify, so you can see if there are irregularities in each frame. like elongated stars, too bright gradients, airplanes passing through. In short, these files should be discarded before stacking, so as to have a final frame as clean as possible. We then open the result obtained from our 3 frames. You see they all tend to green. Apply Graxpert quickly on all 3 to remove gradients, and let's see a moment the difference between the unfiltered frame and the frame with the L-Quef filter, and now also the L-Para filter. I repeat, this, as you have seen, is the result of stacking 5 300-second frames per filter on M8, the brightest nebula in the sky. We proceed with a quick processing. Starting with the unfiltered frame, I apply spectrometric photocolor calibration to adjust the colors. At this point, we stretch the image using screen transfer function and histogram transformation. I activate the real-time preview, reset from the status bar, the screen transfer function, and the image turns black. And directly from the open script, instead we select the nuclear button to stretch the image. Here the script shows us how the image may look stretched, but with the help of histogram transformation, we consolidate the stretch. So we drag the little triangle of screen transfer function down onto the base of the histogram transformation bar that applies the stretch, and as you see, the preview turns white. To apply it definitively to the image, all that remains is to click the square at the bottom left, and our image also turns white. At this point, we reset the stretch, and our frame has been stretched in 2 simple steps. Now, at this point, we remove the stars from the image for separate processing between nebulosity and stars. This makes it so that every change we make to the nebulosity does not create anomalies in the stars, which are already very good without any retouch. Maybe they just need a bit of color. So 2 separate processes. I use StarXTerminator, which creates for me an image with nebulosity and an image with stars. Of course, later I will have to join everything together. We do the same process also for the other 2 images, so also for the frame with the L-Quef filter and the same for the frame with the L-Para filter. So same processing for all 3 frames. We save the frames in 16-bit TIFF to handle everything with Photoshop. Okay, so in Photoshop we handle the starless nebulas. I loaded all 3 frames for a small retouch: the unfiltered frame, the L-Quef filtered frame, and the L-Para filtered frame. We proceed with something simple. The integration is light, but we can improve them a bit. At the bottom right, we have the layers. We duplicate the background layer by dragging it onto the plus sign. This is to then have a sequence in the editing of what we do and be able to go back if we don't like it. We remove a bit of green since, having an RGB Bayer matrix, it's certainly more accentuated. On the top bar, we click Image, then find Adjustments below, and again look for Levels and click. The Levels dialog opens where we can see the histogram of our photo. We go to Channels and select Green. Below the histogram, we take the dark level slider and move it up just a little, say 5 points, to our histogram. Now we try to better adjust the colors and do the same on the blue channel. Moving the dark slider toward our histogram, say 2 points. Click the Preview button and we see a slight color tone improvement. Continuing on the top bar, again find Filter and then Camera Raw filter. Camera Raw opens, we go to Contrast and raise it up to 70 points. Okay, looks good. And we lower the blacks by, say, 30 points. Okay, I think we removed that white haze, and we have a nice contrast between the sky background and the nebulosity. The color's also brightened enough for being only 5 frames, so it seems very good. Actually, I didn't expect to get all this signal. At the bottom, we can click to preview before and after applying Camera Raw and click OK. Now we look at the image noise by zooming in. You see, there's quite a bit as I expected. We then apply Noise Exterminator, maybe not too strong, because with little integration we could make things worse instead of better. We leave it at 70 points with 20 detail. Okay, good. I'll stop here. Let's see the result by recombining the stars. So we go back to Pixinsight, open the starless frame files and the star files for M8 without filter. At this point, we open Pixel Math and click Use Single RGB Expression. Then we indicate the name of the files that must interact with each other. I name the file M8 No Filter Starless. I click plus on the keyboard and insert star no filter, so simple addition between 2 images. Then I check the output image settings. I leave Generate Output Color Space selected, must be RGB. Sample format must be as target to have a color image corresponding to the original image. Then I click the square to apply the process, and here's the final image. It looks nice, but the stars are a bit yellowish. I didn't touch them, they were left as they were. Now I do a small retouch on the stars before the final image. So we open only the stars, give them a bit of color, we open curves, transformation, and open the real-time preview before applying the process. Then we click on S for saturation to give some color to the stars. On the middle diagonal, we click and drag upward to increase saturation. The stars have colored. I'd say that's good. A bit too green though, so we switch to G for green, and on the green diagonal, we click and lower the green tone a bit. Now I'd say the color is more pleasing. Okay, for the stars, we can stop here.
So we've seen a complete processing of the image from start to end. A basic processing that can be broadened with many other processes, or in any case, a workflow that you can follow using Pixinsight and Photoshop and manage our images with a pleasant result anyway. But now we move to the core of this video, that is the fusion/combo of the L-Quef filter and the L-Para filter. For both, we remained at the stretch done in Pixinsight, and then we removed the stars. We only need to proceed in the same way we used for the previous unfiltered image. For the frame with the L-Quef filter and with the L-Para filter, we proceed exactly in the same editing style. So we remove a bit of green with levels, remembering also to adjust blue, add a good bit of contrast, 70 points, and lower the blacks by 30 points. Finally, we apply Noise Exterminator, again with somewhat low settings to avoid damaging the image. When we make the combo, all characteristics, both detail and noise, will be added. So it would be better, in my opinion, to try to clean up the images a bit to avoid stacking noise upon noise. Okay, moving on to Pixinsight, we can also add the stars. But before getting there, let's do a recap. So to recap, we processed the starless images of the L-Quef and L-Para filters. We stretched them, gave contrast, detail, and removed noise, or at least partially. At this point, we take the images from the filters and split the channels. So we will have red corresponding to the H-alpha signal, and blue and green corresponding to O3. For this combo, we will use the red channel. As you see, the other two channels are full of signal too. So nothing forbids doing a combo also with the O3 channels. For now, we only save the red channel in 16-bit TIFF and go back to Photoshop. We leave 3 photos open for this editing. The starless photo of the L-Quef filter, the starless photo of the L-Para filter, the starless photo of the L-Para filter, but only the red channel.
Okay, now we look in Photoshop at the red channel of the L-Para filter. Having taken only this channel, it will be monochrome. If we can, let's do a bit more adjustment to this channel because it will be very useful for the fusion. We enter Camera Raw, drop the blacks a bit, and maybe in this case also the highlights. I wouldn't want the image to look too saturated. We click OK, let's say like that. As the base of our combo, we will use the L-Quef filter image. So we go to the top layer, select it, and from layers go to channels, where here we can see the division of the 3 channels according to trichromy, red, green, blue. Next to the channels layer, we have an eye icon. We turn off the green and blue eyes, leaving only the red channel on, and click on the red channel to select it. Now on the top bar, we go to Select, All, and the entire frame is selected. Then we go on the top bar to Edit, Copy. Now we move to the H-alpha of the L-Para filter. We select again Layers, and on the top bar find Edit, and this time click Paste. Now we take the background layer of our L-Para red and duplicate it by dragging it onto the plus icon. This newly created layer we move with the mouse as the topmost layer. It must be above the red channel of the L-Quef filter. Now to create the correct fusion between these 2 layers, we go to opacity and lower it to 40%. By right-clicking on this layer, a window appears and we select Merge Down. Good, we're at a good point. Now again, we must move everything and bring it back onto our L-Quef filter. So we go to Select, All, then Edit, Copy, and move to the starless L-Quef filter. We go again to Channels, where only the red filter remains selected, and go to Edit, Paste. Good. Now on Channels, we turn on the RGB eyes again, so we re-enable trichromy, and we see how the red channel of the L-Quef filter lights up. What we've done now is a classic H-alpha RGB. I'll show you toggling between the history of the image, how it was before and how it's become now. Now we want to give this photo one more sprint to better merge these 2 frames filters and see all the H-alpha detail.
Now we go back to the L-para filter starless frame, turn off the eye of the top layer we created, select the background layer, and move it as is to the photo of the L-Quef filter we're editing. We go to Select, All. Now we go to Edit, Copy, and move to the L-Quef filter. We go to Edit, Paste, but we're not going to use it as is. We go to Mode and select the bottommost one, Luminosity. The image takes a strange color, so we have to fix it a bit. Then we move opacity and lower it to 20%. Okay, now zooming in the image, we see that inserting this channel has introduced lots of detail into the frame. Good, but the color still needs adjusting. We do another step to improve everything. We go now to the L-para filter starless frame, select the last available layer, and move it onto the photo we're merging. So we select All, Edit, Copy. Now we go again to the modified L-Quef filter photo, select Edit, Paste. Here too, we won't use this frame as is, but we apply a mode, this time color, and with opacity lower it to 40%. Okay, we're there. The two filters are fused. Do I always have to use these settings, especially with opacity, to merge layers? Well, let's say we can manage the settings as we want. We just need to keep in mind that overdoing it may saturate colors. You have to do some tests to understand what fusion style you like best. But the nice thing is that being able to manage from 0 to 100, there are many possibilities to merge images. This means they'll never all be the same, so quite customizable according to your taste. Of course, the result must be pleasant, but one thing I want to point out is that for this combo, we took the L-Quef filter frames and inserted the L-para filter frames as luminance and then as color. So the resulting image is no longer the sum of 5 frames as in this case, but the signal is amplified. Now I'll show you the result of these frames. Top left is my processing of M8 from 5 300-second frames without filter. Top right, we have the L-Quef filter, again 5 frames. Then bottom left, 5 frames with the L-para filter. And finally bottom right, the combo L-Quef L-para. As I told you at the beginning of the video, besides these few frames, I also did a long exposure on this image. And now, so we get to the serious stuff and see how it comes out with 14 hours of integration with the L-Quef filter. I processed the image handling gradients better, revisiting colors, contrasts, lights, sharpness, and here is the final result of my processing. I also did another 15 hours with the L-Para filter. I processed that image adjusting gradients, contrast, light, colors, sharpness, and detail, and this is the final result of my processing. And now enjoy the show of the L-Quef L-Para combo.
I then conducted a second series of tests. Again, 5 frames of 300 seconds each on the nebula NGC 7000, the North American nebula. Here, I immediately noticed that the nebula was less visible, less bright, let's say. Here too, I managed everything like in the previous frames. I stacked the frames with Pixinsight, I removed gradients with Grain Expert and gave color to the nebula with spectrometric photocolor calibration, then stretched the image with histogram transformation and removed the stars with Star Terminator. Then switched to Photoshop to manage color, contrast, lights, and clean noise with Noise Exterminator. And finally, I gave a bit of color to the stars and recombined the nebulosity and stars. And this is my result. Also, for this second test, top right is the first image with 5-frame integration without filter. Top left, the second image with LQ-CF filter, again 5 frames. Then bottom left, integration of 5 frames each from 300 seconds with L-Para filter. And finally, bottom right, the combo with LQ and L-Para filters. Also for this image, I extended integration with the LQ filter. I integrated almost 16 hours, handled gradients, contrast, light, colors, sharpness, and detail, and this is the result of my processing. I then integrated another 17 hours with the L-Para filter. I processed the image adjusting gradients, contrast, light, colors, sharpness, detail, and
And this is the final result of my processing. And here's again the combo with the L-Quef L-para filter. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. There is really so much to say. I made this summary and concentrated it in this video. Thanks again to Optolong for giving me the opportunity to speak and test their filters. If you have questions about the Fusion or how to handle broadband and narrowband frames, write me in the comments. Let me know if you've tried it, will try it, and what you think of this method. If you like the video and photos, give it a like, subscribe to the channel to stay updated on new content. A greeting to everyone, and clear skies.